Coming up, an appeal to Capitol Hill. We'll tell you how this small package can have a huge impact on tribal colleges and universities. Plus, dancing, singing, and marching, all in the name of change. We'll show you the march, bringing tribes and lawmakers together, hoping to make a difference. And there's more to these murals than well-placed art. Hear the message behind some colorful works. That's next on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amirawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today in Oklahoma, where police are investigating the death of a 16-year-old student who died a day after an altercation in a high school bathroom in a fight that may have been prompted by bullying. Officials say Nex Benedict, who identified as non-binary and used they-them pronouns, was able to walk to the principal's office on their own after the incident on February 7th. Benedict's mother, Sue, is a citizen of the Choctaw Nation and told The Independent her child had bruises on their face and eyes as a result. On social media Wednesday, Indigenous advocates shared their condolences and anger for what they say was a blatant attack on the LGBTQ+ teen. Choctaw Chief Gary Batten weighed in, telling ICT in a statement, Nex's death weighs heavily on the hearts of the Choctaw people. The Owasso Police Department says Benedict's autopsy revealed they did not die as a result of trauma, but is still waiting for toxicology and other reports to come back. New data shows Native veterans saved millions in medical costs last year thanks to a new waiver. The Department of Veterans Affairs exempted Native Americans and Alaska Natives from paying co-payments in 2023 under a Biden administration initiative. The new policy allowed Indigenous veterans to save an estimated $2.5 million in medical costs. The VA waiver exempts co-pays for VA medical appointments, urgent care visits, and prescriptions. Last year in total, the department waived 143,000 co-pays for around 3,800 veterans. A new license plate in Minnesota is honoring missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. The new design features a handprint and a ribbon skirt to symbolize the historic silence of Indigenous violence. The state announced the plate last week on February 14th, the Day of Remembrance for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives. According to state crime data, Minnesota had 6 reported Indigenous victims of homicide just last year. The money used to purchase the new plate will go to a fundraising account that brings awareness to the MMIR crisis, educates the public, and hopefully prevents future cases. Those in Minnesota can buy the plate online or in a local DMV. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Tribes are calling for federal action on missing persons cases and unsolved murders in California. Earlier this month, leaders, survivors, and advocates marched together at the state capitol for the 2nd annual Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Summit. ICT's Mackenzie Allen Charmley reports.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
Native American tribes are calling on lawmakers and law enforcement to address the high rates of missing person cases and unresolved killings in Indian country. Last week, California tribal leaders, survivors, victims, and advocates gathered in Sacramento for the 2nd annual Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Summit. They met with lawmakers, experts, and law enforcement officials to discuss possible solutions before staging a day of action that included traditional dancing, singing, and marching around the state capitol. Tribal citizens spoke out about missing and murdered family members whose cases have gone unsolved or unaddressed for years or decades.
My sister Nicole Smith was murdered in my home on the Manchester Reservation in 2017, and I'm here to say her name and to raise awareness about her murder and it being unsolved.
Many say authorities often fail to communicate about the status of pending cases.
So it's definitely affected our family in ways that are pretty much unspeakable of. My parents got pretty ill after my sister passed away, just being heartbroken, always living in fear because the murder was unsolved.
Some lawmakers spoke out in support of the cause and vowed to push for better coordination between tribal police, state, and local law enforcement.
You know, obviously seeing her children grow up without their mother has been super traumatic for everybody. They've suffered from depression, mental illness, other things that follow with that, with the loss of their mother.
In Indian country, generations of unaddressed trauma combine with substance abuse to create a dangerous recipe that often ends in violence. And law enforcement resources and social support programs are too sparse to offer much help.
The missing and murdered Indigenous peoples issue and violence against women has been affecting people in my family for multiple generations.
The high rates of missing persons and unsolved slayings involving Indigenous people have captured the attention of policymakers at the highest levels.
My aunt was shot on the Hupa reservation in the early 80s. She was 18 years old and she died. And to this day, my family does not have a clear story on what happened to her.
In 2019, former President Donald Trump signed an executive order establishing a task force.
When you lose somebody, you don't have closure. I think it's like trying to find your way through the darkness. There's this uncertainty that looms over your life.
The DOI is facing a deadline to respond to a set of recommendations from a special commission that spent months traveling the country speaking with family members, advocates, and police officials about how best to tackle the epidemic.
My grandson, Nick Patterson, our missing family member, lived with me there at Lookout, and I was probably the last family member to see him alive. Like I said, he was 26 years old. It's been 4 years ago that this happened, and there's been absolutely no resolution of this case whatsoever.
Commission members heard hours of heartbreaking testimony from family members who have fought to keep their cases in the spotlight.
You're just left up in the air. You don't know, and it's hard to accept.
For ICT News, Mackenzie Allen, Germany.
Visiting with family and relatives will help us from feeling lonely or socially isolated. COVID-19 changed everything, like our ancestors who survived war, famine, and epidemics. Our elders had to make sacrifices too. The more we are socially connected with our family and community, the less health problems we will have and the longer we will live. We need to stay active to keep our spirits alive. Remember, you are not alone. Connected together, we will stand strong. For more information on elder isolation or caregiver resources, go to connectedindigenousElders.org.
Every February, Indigenous students from 37 tribal colleges and universities make their way to Washington, D.C. to advocate for funding, basic needs, and assistance with community support. Here's ICT political correspondent Polly Donetclaw with more on this story.
In early February, 4 students from Nuwata Hidatsa Sanish College in North Dakota started out early to drop off information packets. The packets are going to congressional members who don't have tribal colleges or universities in their district. This is to make sure that more members of Congress know about the needs of tribal colleges and universities.
We desperately need funding to either maintain or increase with the inflation rate. And we know how to use the money wisely. I feel like Native people aren't frivolous by nature, and I feel like we know how to use our resources wisely. So we just need access to those resources.
Tribal colleges and universities provide students with education and support they won't get anywhere else, from cultural activities, language classes, to emergency aid for food and housing.
Through my TCU, we have a student relief fund for emergencies. So that's one thing I received. I personally I don't qualify for emergency services at the local Native clinic, so I had to go to the ER out of pocket at the end of last semester. So my TCU I applied, and I was able to receive $500 to go towards that ER bill, and that's not something I would have gotten outside of a TCU.
They also allow students to stay in their communities, near their families or support system. For some, it's a homecoming after growing up away from their community and the city.
Growing up in Denver, I was surrounded by a lot of minorities that were not Native American, and it didn't bother me, of course, but it was kind of like culture shock for me because I didn't know if I was Mexican enough, well, not Mexican, Hispanic enough, or if I was Native enough. I was just like kind of in the middle, so I decided to go to a TCU because I've never been around so many natives, so it definitely made me feel welcome. And also, like I said, my grandmother is from the reservation, so I went to move up with her. She's living by herself, but not no more, obviously. She just turned 70 of this last year, so she'll be 71 this year. And yeah, I'm just ready to graduate to make her happy, and also my mother and my dad, too. I mean, my mom or my dad didn't even get their high school diploma. They both have a GED. And yeah, I'm just chose the TCU as well because it helps out like financially.
When tragedy strikes, school advisors are there to help students navigate their situation. They also offer words of encouragement that keep students from dropping out.
After my grandpa passed, I didn't want to go to school anymore. So with the support and everything, they showed me it's important to keep going and not to give up. And I kind of do it for my grandfather to honor him because he was my big role model. So going there and having the support, it means a lot. It's impactful for me. And with my advisor, she helps me stay on course so that I can graduate in time.
Many of these institutions also give students a way to graduate debt-free and to move forward without the worry of a student loan payment, making their bold dreams even more accessible. In Washington, D.C., Polly Denetclaw for ICT News.
We head now to Las Vegas, where a Native nonprofit teamed up with Paramount on a mural project celebrating Native values. ICT's Stuart Huntington has more for us.
Hamo inaniana depinanam muroka haga Brian Melendez inaniana kuibatakaiba watawapinumi kainami. So my name is Brian Melendez. I'm Northern.
Melendez is the founder of Tribal Minds, a Nevada nonprofit that recently partnered with Paramount's Content for Change to put up a series of murals in Las Vegas celebrating Native communities and values.
Content for Change is a company or as an organization wanted to do this project, which became Murals for Change, right? So the Mural project, which ended up becoming what we know it is now, was built upon the idea that these artists, they come with a whole different set of parameters that they want to see for themselves, like what they believe in to be the work that they're doing, right? All in all, it was 3 artists. So Greg Deal, who was one of our artists, he had 2. Danielle C. Walker had 1 in North Las Vegas at the Boys and Girls Club. And then Fawn Douglas, who was a Southern Paiute artist from Las Vegas, had 1 also in the art district. And so we wanted to see what they can make and create that would help people to think a little bit more, ask more questions, be more involved, something that would stimulate thought. And so not only something that was just there, to be a backdrop for a photo op or a social media post, but there was something for people to learn. So I think ultimately we wanted to create work and we wanted to focus on art that was, again, from our perspective as tribal minds, we wanted art that was going to inspire people. We wanted art that was going to make our community stronger. We wanted things that were going to showcase the fact that as Indigenous people, we're not always fighting something, but we are thriving. And that there are moments in our culture and our identities where we are really winning in certain things. We're really good at a lot of things. And so I think that gets convoluted a lot of times in art, in politics, in economics, in academics, sometimes not always conveyed in a way that's really, really specific. And in this, we were being really specific. We wanted to showcase, not only are we here, we're not trying to fight people. We're really trying to showcase to our communities and our children, the youth. Look at this beautiful thing we're doing. Look at what we are making. We are creatives, we are innovators, we are doing things. We have autonomy for ourselves and our culture and our identity, and we can show up and celebrate the concepts, the art, the identity, and we can be together.
Mike Nuwak Nugan Nooch. Hello everyone, I am Ute. Mike Nuwak Nugan Nooch. Mike is hello. Nuwak is everyone. Nuga is I am. And Nooch is Ute. Mike Nuwak Nuga Nooch.
Next, we head to Phoenix, Arizona for last weekend's 34th annual World Championship Hoop Dance Contest. ICT's Ashley Sinclair was there at the city's Heard Museum for the event that draws thousands each year.
On the ancestral lands of the Akmal Advam stands an arena where many come to showcase their skill, passion, and heritage. Citizens from diverse tribal nations gathered over the weekend to participate in the 34th annual World Championship Hoop Dance Contest, drawing people from across the state and beyond. The two-day competition showcases dancers from 4 distinct age groups: youth, teens, seniors, and adults. Keely King, a dancer in the youth division, spoke about the person who inspired her the most to dance, her grandmother.
She used to teach all these older girls, and we would practice at the gym, and she would dance with me, and she gave me a hoop and stuff.
Keely's grandmother was also there to cheer for her granddaughter and reflect on how the hoop dance has evolved from the time she was a dancer.
So I got to be the first female judge here that year. Ojig won. She was the first female champion woman hoop dancer, and it was a monumental moment, I think, for female hoop dancers. Coming here, it's just always been a part of my life to come and just be a group of all the hoop dancers. It's more like a family or a society, and so seeing all these little in the tiny tots, they're now an adults. It's just so amazing to me, and I knew that when I had a little granddaughter that I was gonna give it my all and show her just how she can uplift others through her dancing and give a gift to others.
7-time championship winner Derek Davis showcased an exhibition dance at the competition, but before he took to the arena, he shared his personal connection to hoop dancing and the cultural significance of the event that transcends the competition.
I was thinking about myself when I first came here and heard the older people talk about a story. I found a story to share, and as I think of times now and how naturally things change, sometimes I see myself in certain areas of life finding something that attracts me but traces me back to some of the original ways of doing things.
As Davis took to the arena, many showed their gratitude for his performance by placing money on a blanket on top of the circle, a practice often encouraged as a way to show support and honor towards the dancer. By the end of the 2-day event, the winner received $5,000 and the priceless title of being named the 2024 World Champion of Hoop Dancing. In Phoenix, Arizona, Ashley Sinclair, ICT News.
Earlier this week, the United States vetoed a widely supported resolution with the United Nations demanding a humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. It all started in October of last year when militants from the resistance group Hamas invaded southern Israel. 1,200 Israeli citizens were killed in that attack, and 250 were taken hostage. Since then, Israel's military has retaliated for months, killing an estimated 29,000, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Now, U.S. officials fear escalation through an entire regional war. ICT's Paris Wise spoke with Joint Underscore and ICT reporter Nika Bartube-Smith about the activism that has been sparked as a result and about the shared history between Palestinians and other indigenous groups.
Nika, I don't want to assume that our viewers know the similarities between Native Americans and Palestinian histories of colonization. Can you touch on that for us?
Yeah, so in the reporting that I've done, what has been made really clear to me, especially from Indigenous activists, is that this history mirrors each other hauntingly similarly, right? In the so-called United States, colonizers came over in 1492 and essentially attempted genocide of Native people across Turtle Island. And so thinking about that shared history is where there's this natural alignment of solidarity. I think one other point that's really important to make is that this solidarity isn't new. One of the people that I talked to, Crystal Tubles with Honor the Earth, talked about how being at Standing Rock for the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, a lot of Palestinian people showed up in support and offering solidarity because of that shared history. She also talked about at the UN how Palestinian folks were there showing Indigenous people around the UN when Indigenous folks were first kind of invited to be part of that as well.
You also attended a council meeting in Portland where people were delivering remarks to city commissioners to demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Can you tell us what it was like being there and what were some of those remarks that you heard?
While this is happening in a different country, this is something that has local repercussions. There are Palestinian people that live in the United States that have family back home in Gaza that they are worried about right now. And they talked about, the shared history with Indigenous folks. And so as they were calling for these demands, the city council heard them, but there was very little acknowledgement afterwards. And people at the end of this actually started chanting and silenced the city council members, and they actually had to go into a recess because the room was so loud as people were protesting and demanding that they pass this resolution.
Do you see more of these demonstrations happening throughout Indian country as the conflict continues?
Absolutely. I follow a couple different groups here in Portland that are leading those almost on a weekly basis. A lot of it is stemming from the Portland State University and the Indigenous Student Union and the Palestinian students that go there kind of working together to have these demonstrations really often, and also calling on Portland State University for their involvement with Boeing. I think one of the other things that we see a lot and that really started to kind of spark my own reporting is that a number of different Native nations across the country have called for a ceasefire as well in their own councils. So one of them, I know Yurok is among groups that have, and the Winnemem Wintu tribe in California. So that's another way that Indigenous folks continue to show their solidarity.
Land back! Land back!
Do you believe that work from these organizations and these demonstrations is making an impact?
I think absolutely. I think it's creating these conversations that are really important. I think it's shining a light on how there is so much similarity in Gaza right now with the attempted genocide of Indigenous people across Turtle Island. I think highlighting that solidarity is so important. And I think keeping that conversation going means that then elected officials are seeing that these conversations are happening, and it puts pressure on the US government itself to think about that. So I think absolutely, while, you know, these small demonstrations at a city council in Portland might feel small, it all adds up, right? When this is happening across the country and people are demanding that you don't turn your eyes away from what's happening.
The topic has definitely been sensitive and divisive across Turtle Island. Have you heard of any support for Israel in any of your coverage?
Not with the folks I have talked to. One thing that stands out, and I think was really important to mention from one of the protests I went to and before the city council meeting, was a lot of Jewish folks that were there and showing up in support of Palestine, right? Saying, we are Jewish and we are calling for a ceasefire, and we don't support what is happening, and we don't support the Israeli government. And so I think that has been a really important point that I have seen, is a lot of non-Zionist Jewish people showing up and calling for that ceasefire, calling for that support as well.
Well, we look forward to more of your updates. Nika Bartu-Smith, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That is a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.